The morning my family forgot my birthday, the house was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming like it was trying to comfort me. I lay there for a while, staring at the pale light on the ceiling, waiting for the familiar buzz of my phone. A text from Laura, a funny gif from Michael, even a lazy HBD mom would have done. But the screen stayed black on the nightstand, as still as a stone. I finally reached for it, my fingers stiff from the arthritis in my knuckles. When the screen lit up, it reflected the little lines around my mouth and neck, the soft sag of time. No missed calls, no messages, just a notification from the bank reminding me that the automatic payment for Michael's truck loan had posted again. I stared at that line of text for a few seconds, longer than I should have. Payment to First Bank of Ohio, amount $427.36. Memo, auto loan, M. Carter. That was my older son. The loan was in my name, of course. Michael's credit needed help, he'd said 3 years ago, leaning against my kitchen counter and promising he'd pay me back every month. For a while he did. Then it became, "Next month, Mom, I swear." And then it became silence and me making sure the truck didn't get repossessed because that would look bad for him at work. I sighed and set the phone down, the plastic of the case tapping softly against the wood. 68 years old. You'd think I would be used to disappointment by now. But some disappointments never wear out. The calendar on the wall above my little desk had a circle around today's date. I'd drawn it myself in red pen, a silly habit I'd kept since I was a girl. Eleanor's birthday. I'd written in my shaky handwriting, just in case I forgot. It looked almost childish, like something I would have done in high school when I was still Eleanor May Thompson, before I became a wife, then a mother, then a widow, then whatever I was now. I made coffee the way Henry used to like it, out of habit more than anything. 2 scoops, not packed too tight. The smell filled the tiny kitchen of my apartment, mixing with the faint scent of lemon cleaner I'd used the night before. When Henry was alive, birthdays meant waking up to his off-key singing and the sound of bacon sputtering in the pan. He'd present me with a crooked stack of pancakes shaped like hearts, or at least his version of hearts, and a little Walgreens card with too many stickers on it. "Another year wiser, Ellie," he'd say, kissing my forehead. Henry's gone now, 6 years. Lung cancer. I still have the folder from the hospital, thick with bills, payment plans, insurance statements, and those cold white receipts they print out in pharmacies. I keep them all in a blue binder I bought at the office supply store, labeled in my careful script, hospital and medical. It feels like a gravestone I can hold. I poured the coffee into my chipped white mug and looked at the digital clock on the stove. 9:02 a.m. Still time for someone to remember. Maybe they were busy getting the kids ready for school. Maybe Laura was in a meeting. Maybe David had forgotten to charge his phone again. My mind rushed to excuse them the way a mother does without thinking. I opened the fridge and glanced at the small vanilla cake I'd bought myself yesterday at the grocery store. It sat on the middle shelf in a plastic container, the white frosting smeared slightly on the sides where it had bumped against something. "Happy birthday," it said in pink letters, with no name. I'd told the bakery girl it was for a friend. By 10 o'clock, I had checked my phone so often that my fingerprint sensor complained and made me enter my passcode. Still nothing. But the group chat, Family Circus, named by my grandkids, was busy enough. Photos of my youngest granddaughter, Emma, at her school assembly, a video of Tyler hitting a baseball, a meme about Monday mornings. Hearts and laughing emojis flew back and forth, all without a single happy birthday, Mom, threaded between them. I watched the little gray typing bubbles appear and disappear twice. Each time, my breath hitched just a bit. Maybe they were planning some surprise message. Maybe. The bubbles vanished. Another picture of someone's lunch appeared instead. By 11, the silence around my birthday felt deliberate. Even if I knew, logically, it was probably just thoughtlessness. That's the thing about being the one who always takes care of everything. People get used to you being there, like the coffee machine or the porch light. Useful, familiar, easy to forget until something goes wrong. I rinsed my mug in the sink and decided I would not spend my birthday waiting on push notifications. I put on my nicest blouse, the pale blue one Henry always said brought out my eyes, and my dark slacks that didn't show cat hair. I checked my wallet, $30 in cash, a debit card, my Medicare card tucked neatly behind it. Everything in order like always. Outside, the winter sunlight in Ohio was thin and tired, but at least the air was dry. I locked the apartment door, double-checking the knob out of habit, then walked down the hallway, my sensible shoes tapping softly on the worn carpet. The building smelled faintly of old cooking oil and laundry detergent. I decided to go to Miller's Diner, the place Henry and I used to go on Saturday mornings, when the kids were small and money was tighter than it is now. Back then, I stretched dollars like rubber bands. Now, I stretched my patience. The bell over the diner door jingled as I stepped inside. The booths were mostly empty, just a truck driver in a faded cap and a teenage couple sharing a plate of fries. The smell of bacon, coffee, and a hint of bleach from just mopped floors wrapped around me like an old blanket. "Mornin', ma'am," the waitress called. She was young, mid-20s, maybe, with a ponytail pulled through a black cap. Her name tag said Jenna. I slid into a booth by the window. The vinyl seat squeaked, and I smiled, remembering Henry's mock complaints about it. I set my phone on the table, screen facing up. Old habits die hard. Jenna brought over a laminated menu, worn at the edges. "You want coffee to start?" she asked. "Yes, please. And could I see the dessert menu too?" I said. Her eyes crinkled at the corners. "Starting the day right, huh?" "It's my birthday," I said, more softly than I meant to. Her face brightened in a way my phone screen never had that morning. "Oh, happy birthday," she said. "How old are we celebrating?" 68, I replied. I watched for the little flicker people sometimes get when they're surprised someone my age is still out and about alone. There was none. Just a simple nod, like 68 was a perfectly fine age to be. "Well, 68 looks good on you," she said. "I'll bring that coffee, on the house. Birthday rule." I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. "Thank you, dear," I murmured. She brought the coffee, left the check face down with a small, absent-minded flourish. Old habit, I supposed. Servers learned to move on quickly. I ordered a simple breakfast. 2 eggs, rye toast, a small fruit cup. I could almost hear Henry teasing me about being fancy with fruit. While I ate, I glanced now and then at my phone. At 11:37, a notification popped up from the electric company. "Your autopay has been processed. Amount, $112.89. That was for Laura's house. A few years ago, when her husband lost his job for a stretch, I'd called the company myself, sat on hold for 43 minutes, and arranged to have their bill linked to my account for a little while. The arrangement had never been undone. My name was still on the online dashboard, along with my bank information and a neat list of their monthly charges. Each one paid in full in a quiet, digital record they probably hadn't looked at in years. I stared at the notification and swallowed the sour taste in the back of my mouth. Not one message from them, but the power at their house was on, thanks to me. "Everything tasting okay?" Jenna asked when she came back around. "It's good," I said. "Thank you." She hesitated, then nodded toward my phone. Got all your birthday messages coming in? I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Not yet, I answered. I think they're busy. She frowned, a tiny line forming between her brows. She picked up my empty coffee mug. Well, that's no good, she said. I'll be right back. I watched her walk away, disappearing behind the counter. The truck driver left some crumpled bills on his table and stomped out. The teenage couple took a selfie, their heads pressed together, the girl's bright pink nails flashing in the reflection of the window as she tapped her phone. I wondered what I would look like in a selfie if I tried to take one. I imagined the soft wrinkles, the gray streaks in my hair, the brown spot on my left cheek shaped like a coma in a sentence that hadn't ended yet. After a few minutes, Jenna came back balancing something small and carefully held. It was a slice of chocolate cream pie, the meringue browned just right on top. Had stuck a single blue candle in the center, a little crooked. I hope you don't mind, she said. We usually save these for later, but I figured today's a good day. My hand flew to my throat. Oh, honey, you didn't have to. I know, she said, but I wanted to. She glanced toward the counter, where an older cook in a white apron gave a small thumbs up. Go ahead, make a wish. She struck a match and lit the candle. The tiny flame flickered, reflected in the window beside me. For a moment, the diner seemed to go quiet, like the world was holding its breath with me. I closed my eyes. I thought of Henry's laugh, of the way he used to squeeze my hand twice in the grocery store line to say, "Love you." I thought of long nights at the kitchen table, sorting bills, sliding my debit card into websites, transferring funds from my tiny savings to cover someone else's sudden emergency. I thought of watching Laura's kids while she and her husband went on vacations I'd only seen on their social media posts afterward, my name never appearing in the captions. Though I was the one who'd stayed overnight with fevers and bad dreams. And I thought of my phone, black and silent on the table. My wish surprised me with how clear it was. I didn't wish for them to remember. I didn't wish for a late-night apology or a big party or flowers at my door. For the first time in a very long time, I wished for something that belonged only to me. I wished to stop being the woman they assumed would always pick up the check. I blew out the candle. The smoke curled up in a thin ribbon, then faded. Happy birthday, miss, Jenna prompted. Eleanor, I said. Thank you, Jenna. This is very kind. She smiled. You remind me of my grandma, she said. She raised 3 kids on her own, tough as nails, but she cries at dog food commercials. She laughed a little. People like you deserve pie. The words hit me in a place I didn't know was sore. People like you. Not, Mom, hey, can you watch the kids? Not, can you put this on your card just until Friday? Just a girl in a diner noticing an old woman sitting alone and deciding she deserved something sweet. I took a bite of the pie. The chocolate was rich and cool, the crust just a little flaky. It tasted better than any birthday cake I'd had in years, maybe because I hadn't bought it for myself. When the check came, there was a small note written in blue pen at the bottom. It said, Pie's on me. Happy birthday. Jay. The total was less than I expected. Coffee, $0, slice of pie, $0, breakfast, $7.99 before tax. I felt ridiculous tears prick at the corners of my eyes as I opened my wallet. I pulled out a 20 and tucked it under the edge of the check with my receipt. I flipped the paper over and looked at my own name printed there. Eleanor Carter. The computer had filled it in from my debit card. My own name. Not Mom, not Grandma, not, could you just Eleanor, a paying customer who existed on paper, in ink and numbers, in a way that couldn't be scrolled past or forgotten. As I signed the receipt, I noticed my hand was steady. I wrote my full name in careful cursive, the same way I'd signed the mortgage papers with Henry, the car loan for Michael, the student loan paperwork with David, the lease guarantee for Laura's first apartment. My signature had been the quiet backbone of this family's life for decades, always there at the bottom of important documents. For the first time, I wondered what might happen if I stopped putting it everywhere they wanted it. Outside, the air felt colder, sharper. I pulled my coat tighter around me and started the slow walk back to the bus stop. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and my heart jumped. I took it out, already imagining a belated, "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry, crazy morning." It was a notification from the credit card company instead, another monthly summary. Total spent at Carter Family Auto Repair, $312.87. That was Michael again, buying parts for the shop. I'd opened that card years ago, just for business emergencies. And somehow, my definition of emergency had been stretched thinner and thinner. I stood there on the cracked sidewalk, watching my breath cloud in the air. Cars rolled by, drivers blurred behind glass. Somewhere, my children were living their busy lives under the glow of lights I helped keep on, in houses I'd helped them keep, driving cars I'd helped them buy. And here I was, 68 years old, birthday celebrated by a stranger who'd written me a little note on the back of a receipt. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without clearing the notification. For once, I didn't rush to make a payment or check a balance. Instead, I reached into my purse and touched the corner of my blue binder, the one I always carried now. It held copies of everything: bank statements, utility bills, contracts, loan documents, printouts of emails. My whole life, arranged in plastic sleeves, neat and undeniable. I felt something shift inside me, slow but certain, like the creak of an old door finally starting to open. On the ride home, I watched the winter sun drag long shadows across the ground. My reflection in the bus window looked tired, but not broken. I thought of Jenna's blue ink note, safe in my wallet now, proof that my existence had been seen, if only for a moment, by someone who didn't owe me anything. By the time I stepped back into my quiet apartment and set my keys in the little bowl by the door, the hurt of the morning had hardened into something else. Not anger, exactly. Something steadier. Something with edges. I walked to my desk, pulled out the blue binder, and placed it carefully in the center. The plastic cover caught the light from the window, and the label with my handwriting seemed suddenly more important than it had the day I'd written it. Hospital and medical, it said. But behind that were other sections, neatly tabbed: loans, utilities, legal, insurance. My name was on every page, my signature at the bottom of so many lines. I ran a fingertip over the letters. For the first time in a very long time, I didn't feel like a background character in everyone else's story. I felt like a woman holding the proof of just how much she had given and how much she might be able to change simply by deciding where her name would go from now on. The next morning began with a kind of stillness I hadn't felt in years. Not peace. Peace has softness to it. This was something firmer, like the moment before a storm decides whether to break. I sat at my desk with a cup of coffee, the steam curling up against the pale winter light, and opened my blue binder. The familiar rustle of plastic sleeves was almost comforting, like turning the pages of an old diary. I hadn't meant to start reviewing everything. It just happened. One page led to another, old loan papers with Michael's shaky signature beside my steady one, utility bills addressed to Laura's home but charged to my account, and a stack of email printouts from David about his temporary need for help when he moved states 3 years ago. Temporary, I realized, had become a permanent feature of their vocabulary. Somewhere between the loan documents and a receipt for a kitchen appliance I'd bought for Laura's birthday last year, my phone buzzed. My heart stumbled just for a moment before I picked it up. A message from the family group chat. A video of Emma losing her front tooth. No mention of yesterday. No, sorry, Mom, we forgot. Nothing. I typed, looks cute, then erased it. I set the phone face down. I looked again at the binder. I found a contract I'd nearly forgotten. David's old apartment lease. I had co-signed, of course. He'd moved out early, left the place in terrible condition, and the landlord had sent me the repair invoice. I remembered paying it online late at night, the glow of the screen lighting up the empty living room. There'd been no apology then either, just his voice saying, "You know how stressful moving is, Mom." A tightness settled under my ribs. It surprised me with its clarity. For so long, I'd swallowed these things like bitter pills, convincing myself they were part of motherhood, part of love, part of being needed. But the binder didn't lie. It didn't soften the edges or make excuses. It held every truth I had allowed to pile on my back. Around noon, I finally stood and reached for my coat. The apartment smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I kept in drawers, a scent Henry used to tease me about. I smiled at the memory, then let it fade. I had errands to run, real ones this time, not the kind my children created. At the bank, the glass doors sighed open and warm air washed over me. A young man in a crisp shirt, no older than my grandson, greeted me. "How can I help you today, ma'am?" "I'd like to review some accounts," I said, steady as I could. He led me to a small desk, tapping on a keyboard as I handed over my ID. I watched the screen brighten his face as he scrolled through pages. My checking account, my savings, the automatic payments I'd nearly forgotten were still active. "Looks like you have several recurring transfers," he said politely. "Would you like to make changes?" For a moment, I saw flashes of my life as numbers. The electric bill I'd been paying for 5 years. The auto loan for a truck I rarely saw. Memberships renewed for people who never asked if I wanted to keep helping. My heart fluttered, but my voice stayed calm. "Yes," I said, "I would." He clicked through menus. "Which ones would you like to amend?" I took a slow breath. All of them. He blinked but didn't question me. The soft clacking of his keyboard sounded almost like applause. When he finished, he printed a summary and slid it across the desk. My name, just mine, sat alone on every line now. As I traced the bold letters with my fingertip, something warm flickered in my chest. Maybe relief. Maybe the first small spark of something like freedom. Walking home, the sidewalk glittered with thin frost. I held the bank papers close to me, the pages crisp and clean. My phone buzzed in my pocket again. Another message from the group chat, laughter and emojis spilling across the screen. I didn't open it. Instead, I kept walking, the winter air cool on my cheeks. For the first time in years, I felt the faintest hint of space around me, as if the world had quietly widened and was waiting to see what I would do next. That evening, after I'd folded the bank papers into the blue binder and set it carefully on the table, the quiet of my apartment felt different. Not heavy, not lonely, just honest. I made myself a small dinner, soup from a can, and half a sandwich, and ate it while the late news murmured in the background. I wasn't really listening. My mind kept drifting to the young man at the bank. How effortlessly he had undone years of obligations with a few taps of his keyboard. How light my purse had felt when I walked out of there, even though nothing inside it had changed. But the real weight lifted later, when I settled into my chair and opened the binder again. I wasn't looking for anything specific. I simply turned the pages and let the details wash over me. Dates, signatures, balances, every line a quiet reminder of how far I'd stretched myself for people who rarely saw the stretch. I paused on a copy of an email from Laura. It was one of those long messages she typed late at night during her first year of marriage. Frantic, pleading, apologetic. She needed help with a down payment for a used car back then. Her husband had been between jobs, and she wrote, "You're the only one I can count on, Mom. I'll pay you back as soon as things settle." I remembered calling the bank, transferring the money, driving to her house the next morning with homemade muffins to cheer her up. She cried on my shoulder, promising it was temporary. Temporary. I had believed that word so many times. I felt my throat tighten. I closed the binder and rested my hand on top of it. Have you ever felt something like this? That slow, dawning realization that the love you offered so freely had turned into something they felt entitled to? I wasn't angry. Anger is sharp, loud, impossible to swallow. What I felt was quieter, like the ache after lifting something heavy for too long. The kind that makes you stop and finally admit to yourself that you can't keep carrying it. The next day, I woke early. My body still followed old rhythms. Henry's work schedule, the kids' school days, the years of packing lunches and catching buses. I brewed coffee and sat at the kitchen table, letting the warmth soothe my cold fingers. My phone buzzed, and this time I looked at it. A message from Michael. Finally. "Hey, Mom, can you cover the shop insurance payment this month? I'll get you back after tax season." Not a word about my birthday. Not even a good morning. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. My hands didn't shake, though part of me expected they would. I typed back slowly, choosing each word with care. "I can't do that anymore, Michael. You'll need to handle it yourself." I hit send before I could soften it, before I could add emojis, apologies, explanations. They were habits of mine, little cushions I placed under other people so they would never fall too hard. Within a minute, he replied, "Mom, seriously, you know how tight things are, just this once." Just this once. The phrase landed like a pebble dropped in a deep well. I set the phone down and walked to the window. Outside, a neighbor was brushing snow off his car, humming something I couldn't quite hear. Life kept going, moving forward, with or without my endless yeses. When I returned to the table, I typed again, "I've helped for years. I need to step back now." I watched the typing bubbles appear, vanish, reappear. My heart thudded, but I stayed still. Finally, the message came. "Wow, okay, guess we know where we stand." I closed my eyes. The words were meant to sting, and they did, but not the way he intended. They didn't pull me backward. They pushed me forward. Later that afternoon, I carried my binder to the community center a few blocks away. They offered free legal consultations once a week, and though I didn't think I needed a lawyer, I wanted clarity. A woman named Margaret, with silver hair and steady eyes, greeted me. "What brings you in today?" she asked gently. I laid the binder on the desk between us. "I just need to understand what's in my name, what I'm responsible for, what I'm not." She took her time. She flipped through loan statements, service contracts, co-signed leases. Her brow furrowed only once, at the truck loan, and she clicked her tongue softly. "You've taken on quite a lot," she said. "I have," I replied, "but I think it's time to undo some of it." She nodded, almost with admiration. "Good. You're allowed to protect yourself, you know." I felt a strange warmth bloom in my chest. Permission, validation, something I hadn't realized I'd been craving. Margaret showed me how to request formal removal from old accounts, how to document payments and send certified letters, how to ensure that anything tied to me without my consent could be challenged. She spoke calmly, as if it were the most natural thing in the world for a woman my age to reclaim pieces of herself. On my way out, she rested a hand on the binder. "You've been carrying this alone for a long time," she said softly. "It's okay to set some of it down." Her words lingered with me all the way home. That night, I sat in my armchair, the binder on my lap, and listened to the hum of the radiator. I thought about the years behind me, about the ones ahead, however many there might be. I thought about my children and how love can cloud judgment until one day the fog lifts and you see the outlines of truth clearly for the first time. Did you ever realize too late that you were being used? The question drifted through me like a whisper, but for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of asking it. I felt relieved, because now, finally, I had begun to answer it. The next morning, a pale winter sun spilled through the blinds, striping the carpet with soft gold. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long moment, listening to the muted hum of the building. Pipes clicking, someone's television faint behind a wall, the shuffle of footsteps upstairs. Ordinary sounds. Yet the world felt slightly different, like someone had turned the page when I wasn't looking. I dressed slowly, choosing a warm cardigan Henry had given me years ago. The pockets were stretched from all the times I'd stuffed receipts and notepads into them, back when I was juggling the household finances, the kids' homework, the grocery lists, and whatever crisis happened to be burning hottest that week. Funny how small objects can carry the weight of entire decades. My phone buzzed as I was buttering toast. A message from Laura this time. "Mom, did you turn off the electric bill? I just got a notice that the autopay failed. Is everything okay?" For a moment, my instinct tugged hard. To reassure, to fix, to smooth everything over. That reflex lived deep in my bones. But then I pictured the bank papers I'd signed, the boy at the counter clicking through screens, the sudden quiet in my chest after years of noise. I typed, "I stopped paying it. It was never meant to be permanent. You'll need to update your account information." I didn't add anything else. No explanation, no apology. I set the phone down. A minute later, it chimed again. "Mom, are you mad at me? Why didn't you say something earlier? We're dealing with a lot right now." I breathed slowly. It was always like this. My needs became an inconvenience, a disruption in their schedule. I typed, "I'm not mad. I just can't keep covering things. You and Mark can handle your expenses now." No typing bubbles appeared this time. The silence stretched across my kitchen table like a shadow. I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee, letting the warmth settle me, and decided to stop waiting for anyone's reaction. Today, I had somewhere to be. At the community center, where Margaret had helped me the day before, there was a bulletin board cluttered with flyers, tax prep clinics, grief groups, knitting circles. A small yellow note caught my eye. Volunteers needed at food pantry, Tuesdays and Thursdays. I traced the edge of the paper with my finger. For years, I'd built my entire identity around helping my children because I thought no one else needed me. But here was a whole world beyond them, full of people who didn't expect anything from me except the time I was willing to give. I signed my name on the sheet. As I left the building, I felt a crisp breeze sweep across my face. It startled a laugh out of me, a tiny one, but real. I couldn't remember the last time I'd made a choice purely for myself. When I got home, I found a voicemail from Michael. His voice was flat, tight. "Mom, I don't get what's going on with you. I counted on you for the insurance. You can't just pull out like that. Call me." I listened to it twice. Not a mention of my birthday, not a word of concern. Just expectation, like always. I didn't call back. Instead, I opened the binder on my dining table and began preparing the certified letters Margaret had recommended. Copies of contracts, dates of payments, notices of termination. The kind of paperwork my children had never bothered to understand, though they were happy to let me shoulder the responsibility. The printer whirred softly, spitting out each page with a comforting rhythm. I checked every line twice, attaching receipts, writing down confirmation numbers. These were things I used to do with a restless feeling in my stomach, always rushing, always compensating. But today my mind felt still, focused. Around 4 in the afternoon, my doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone. Through the peephole, I saw my neighbor, Mrs. Atkins, the one with the fluffy gray sew and the loud opinions about everything from recycling habits to weather predictions. She held a small brown paper bag. When I opened the door, she smiled without her usual fuss. "Made too much chicken soup," she said. "Thought you might want some." I blinked in surprise. "That's very kind of you," she shrugged. "You looked tired yesterday." We all have days like that. I accepted the bag, the warm container pressing gently into my palms. After she left, I stood there in my quiet apartment, staring at the simple gift. There was something humbling about it, care offered without demand, without expectation. I placed the soup on the counter and exhaled. Not everything meaningful had to come from family. Sometimes kindness arrived from unexpected corners of life, wrapped in the warmth of something homemade. Later that evening, while the soup simmered on the stove, my phone vibrated again, this time with a longer message from Laura. "Mom, I talked to Mark. We're confused. You've always helped us. Why are you changing now? Did something happen? Can we talk?" I held the phone, feeling its faint buzz against my fingertips like a pulse. Something had happened, yes. Something quiet and overdue. But I wasn't ready to explain it to them yet. They would twist it, interpret it through their own needs. They wouldn't hear the truth until the truth settled fully inside me first. So I placed the phone face down on the table, letting the screen go dark. As the room filled with the soft scent of simmering broth, I realized something gently but profoundly true. Change doesn't always announce itself with fanfare. Sometimes it begins with a stranger's birthday pie, a bank form, a canceled payment, a small act of boundary setting. Small steps, almost invisible, until one day you look around and realize you've started walking in a new direction without even noticing the moment your feet turned. And I knew deep in my bones that I wasn't turning back. The following morning, the sky hung low and gray, the kind that made everything look slightly faded. I wrapped my scarf tighter as I headed toward the mailbox in the lobby, carrying the stack of certified letters I'd prepared the night before. The envelopes felt heavier than paper, like they carried years of swallowed feelings inside them. I slid each one into the outgoing slot slowly, almost ceremonially. A letter to the auto loan company removing my authorization, another to the electric utility, confirming my termination of payment responsibility. One to the landlord from David's old lease, documenting that I was no longer a guarantor for anything tied to his name. When the last envelope disappeared into the metal slot, with a soft thump, I stepped back and exhaled. It felt like clearing old furniture out of a room that had never really been mine. On my way back upstairs, I passed Mrs. Atkins again. Her little dog was wearing a sweater that looked hand-knitted. "Mornin', Eleanor," she said. "You heading out today?" "Maybe later," I replied. "I have a few things to put in order." She nodded knowingly, as if she understood more than she let on. "Good. It's never too late to get things in order." In my apartment, I made oatmeal and poured a bit of honey on top. The spoon clicked softly against the bowl, steady and rhythmic. I noticed I was eating slower, savoring each bite instead of rushing as if someone needed me in the next room. It was such a small detail, but small details can reveal who you've been serving all your life and who you've forgotten to serve. Around noon, my phone lit up again. This time it was David. "Mom, I got a strange email from the landlord about the old lease. Why are you sending letters now? Everything was already taken care of years ago. I felt a pinch in my chest. He genuinely believed that. Believed that things took care of themselves, not that I had quietly negotiated, paid, and resolved every financial mess he left behind. I typed, "I'm just updating my records, that's all." He replied immediately, "Is this about your birthday? We were going to call later. You know we're busy with the move." The move. Yes, the move I hadn't known about until Laura casually mentioned it in the family chat 2 weeks ago. I stared at the screen. They'd been boxing up their lives, reorganizing their homes, shifting everything around, yet none of them had shifted even an inch toward me on the day I'd been born. "I'm fine," I wrote. "Take care of your responsibilities. I'm taking care of mine." No more messages came after that. The quiet that followed didn't sting the way it used to. It felt clarifying. Later that afternoon, I walked to the community food pantry for my first volunteer shift. The room smelled of cardboard and canned tomatoes, and a radio played soft oldies static, smudged in the background. People moved with gentle purpose, sorting boxes, labeling shelves, greeting visitors with warm smiles. A woman named Rosa showed me where the canned vegetables were stored and how to scan donations into the system. She was kind in a practical way, no fuss, no pity, just a steady presence. "You do this before?" she asked as we unpacked a crate of oatmeal packets. "No," I said, "but I'm learning." She smiled. "Good. We always need people who pay attention." Pay attention. The words warmed me more than they should have. For years, my attentiveness had been invisible, absorbed by people who assumed my care was an endless well. Here, it actually mattered. Here, my steadiness was a skill instead of a silent burden. While we worked, a young mother came in, juggling 2 children and a folder of documents. She had that weary look I recognized all too well, eyes darting between responsibility and exhaustion. She apologized 3 times for not having her paperwork organized. I helped her gather the forms, smoothing them out on the table, pointing to the lines she needed to fill. She thanked me so quietly it felt like a whisper. Something shifted inside me then, soft but unmistakable. It wasn't the old compulsion to save everyone. It wasn't martyrdom or guilt or obligation. It was simply kindness, offered freely without being drained by expectation. When my shift ended, Rosa patted my arm. "You're good here," she said. "Come back Thursday." Walking home, my steps felt lighter. A little breeze tousled the loose strands of my hair, and I found myself humming one of the radio tunes under my breath. I hadn't hummed in years. Back in my apartment, as the evening light turned amber across the living room carpet, I made tea and sat quietly with it, holding the warm mug in both hands. My phone sat across the room on the counter, dark and silent. I didn't reach for it. There is a strange kind of peace that comes when you stop waiting for people who stopped noticing you long ago. A peace that grows slowly, like a seed finally getting Earth's sunlight. I felt it settling in me now, steady and warm, like the start of something I hadn't yet named, but something mine, entirely mine. The next morning began with a soft tapping on my window, melting snow slipping from the eaves. I sat up slowly, the lingering warmth of sleep still heavy in my limbs. For the first time in a long while, I didn't wake with that dull weight in my chest, the one that whispered reminders of bills to cover, crises to manage, favors to anticipate. Instead, I felt unburdened. Not entirely, but enough to notice. I made coffee and opened the curtains. The sky was a pale watercolor blue, streaked with thin clouds. A few children trudged through the courtyard below, backpacks bouncing, their laughter echoing faintly. I stood there a long moment, letting the scene wash over me, the ordinariness of it soothing in a way I hadn't expected. My phone sat on the table, still dark. I didn't mind. Around mid-morning, I gathered some paperwork to bring to the community center. Margaret had asked me to return with any remaining loan documents so she could help me draft follow-up letters. I slipped the binder into my tote bag and headed out. The community center buzzed with quiet activity. A few older men were playing cards near the window, their laughter sharp and warm. A toddler toddled across the rug while her mother filled out a form. And behind her desk sat Margaret, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, her eyes brightening when she saw me. "Eleanor," she said warmly, "back already?" "I thought I should finish what we started," I replied, setting the binder down. "Loose ends." She opened it delicately, like it was something fragile. "Let's take a look." We spent an hour sorting through the remaining papers. She showed me how to submit formal revocation notices for accounts I'd co-signed, how to request confirmation letters from the companies, and how to secure documentation for my own protection. She explained everything with the patience of someone who understood the cost of years spent saying yes. As she leafed through the pages, she paused on an old statement from the truck loan. "They really let you carry this alone," she murmured. I swallowed. Hearing someone else acknowledge it, it hit deeper than I expected. "I let myself carry it," I said quietly. "That might be the harder truth." She looked at me then, steady and gentle. "Awareness is a powerful turning point." I nodded, though my throat felt tight. "Have you ever realized only in hindsight that you trained people to rely on your silence more than your voice?" When our work was done, I thanked her and stepped outside. The cold air stung my cheeks, but I welcomed it. It made me feel awake. As I walked home, my phone finally vibrated. A text from Laura. "Mom, we're really confused. You've never done this before. Why now? Did someone say something to you?" I stopped on the sidewalk. The question hung in the air like frost. Why now? I thought of the diner, the candle flickering on a slice of pie given by a stranger who saw me more clearly in an hour than my family had in years. I thought of the crisp papers from the bank, the way my name looked on the page when it wasn't buried under someone else's needs. I thought of the quiet satisfaction of volunteering, of being useful in a way that didn't drain me. I typed back, "I'm making changes. I need to take care of myself too." 3 dots appeared, blinked, disappeared, reappeared, then vanished again. I didn't wait for a reply. When I reached my apartment, I was surprised to find a voicemail waiting. It was from a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, calm, official, filled the room when I pressed play. "Hello, this is Officer Daniels from the Tremont Police Department. We received a report regarding a financial issue tied to your name. There's no emergency, but we'd like to speak with you to clarify a few details. Please call us back at your earliest convenience." My heart gave a slow, heavy thud. I knew immediately what it must be about. Michael. The truck. The insurance he'd wanted me to cover. Maybe a lapse in payment, maybe a claim filed under an account no longer linked to me. I listened to the message again. The officer's voice steady, courteous, neutral. This wasn't trouble, I told myself. This was clarity catching up. I called the number. Officer Daniels answered, his tone professional but not unkind. "Mrs. Carter, thank you for calling back. We just need to verify your involvement with an auto policy connected to your son." I explained calmly that I had removed my authorization, that I was no longer financially tied to the contract, that all payments and responsibilities were transferred to Michael. I offered dates, copies of letters I'd mailed, confirmation numbers. The officer listened carefully. "You're doing everything by the book," he said. I just needed to document your statement. You're not liable for anything after the termination date. His reassurance settled something inside me. Not relief exactly, but validation. Evidence that I had stepped out of a shadow I'd stood in for too many years. "Thank you, officer," I said. And I meant it. After the call, I sat very still. The heater hummed softly. Outside, the sky had deepened to a muted silver. I folded my hands in my lap and felt the quiet spread through me. Not the lonely kind, but the steady kind that comes when you finally choose yourself after a lifetime of choosing others. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was bracing for the next demand or apology or favor disguised as an emergency. For the first time, I felt like the ground under me wasn't shifting. I felt anchored. The next day unfolded with a strange softness, the kind that makes you pause before you even realize what you're pausing for. I woke early, out of habit, but instead of rushing to check emails or bank alerts or my children's messages, I simply sat at the edge of my bed and breathed. The room was cool, the radiator ticking its slow rhythm, almost like it was keeping time with my heartbeat. I made oatmeal again, drizzling honey in a slow spiral. Halfway through eating, I noticed I wasn't waiting for my phone to light up, not expecting it, not hoping for it. The quiet felt less like an empty space and more like a clearing, somewhere light could finally reach. Around mid-morning, I headed to the pantry for my second volunteer shift. The walk felt easier than usual. The air carried that faint metallic scent winter brings, the promise of snow not yet fallen. As I pushed the door open, warmth and familiar chatter greeted me. Rosa waved from behind a stack of canned beans. "You're early," she teased. "I had time," I replied, shrugging off my coat. We fell into the rhythm of sorting donations, sliding cans across metal shelves, labeling boxes with thick black markers. The work was simple but grounding. There was no crisis to avert, no obligation woven into guilt, no ledger of who owed what. Just hands doing good work, one small task at a time. A man named Arthur, maybe mid-70s, with a face like worn leather and eyes too kind for the world, worked beside me today. He cracked quiet jokes under his breath, dry humor that slipped out like little gifts. "You're quick with those labels," he said after watching me for a minute. "Most folks take all day." I smiled. "Years of organizing bills," I said. "Old habits." He nodded slowly. "Habits can build a person," he said, "or bury them." The words stayed with me long after we finished. While I was helping a woman fill out her food assistance form, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It vibrated twice, long enough to demand attention, but I ignored it until my shift was over. When I finally checked it outside, the cold nipped at my fingertips. A message from Michael, 4 lines long. "Mom, officer called me. Why didn't you tell me you revoked everything? Now I've got a mess to fix. You blindsided me. This isn't like you." I stared at the screen for a long moment. The old reflex rose. Explain, apologize, soften. But it felt foreign now, like muscle memory from a life I no longer lived. I typed back only one sentence. "You need to handle the things that belong to you." I tucked the phone back into my coat and kept walking. When I reached home, a letter was waiting on my doormat, an official-looking envelope with the bold black print of a utility provider. My breath hitched, almost expecting bad news. But when I opened it, I felt an odd sense of triumph. It read, "Your name has been successfully removed from this account. No further charges will be applied." A small victory, but a real one. Proof of effort made visible on paper. I placed the letter in the binder under a new tab I'd created last night. Confirmations. a section devoted not to obligations, but to closures, doors I had finally firmly shut. While I was sorting the papers, the phone rang again. Laura this time. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice played out in that practiced brightness she used when she was uncomfortable. Mom, listen, I talked to Mark, and we think maybe we should meet this weekend, just to clear the air. You've been acting different. We want to understand. Can you call me back? Acting different. The phrase sat strangely in my mind, as if reclaiming myself were a performance, as if my boundaries were a phase, as if my wants were an interruption to their routine. I didn't call her back. Instead, I made tea and sank into my armchair, letting the steam warm my face. I picked up an old photo album from the shelf, the one with Henry's handwriting on the spine. Inside were pictures of us on road trips, church picnics, birthdays he never once forgot. I traced his face with the tip of my finger. You'd tell me to keep going, I whispered. You always did. As daylight dimmed, the album sat open on my lap, the edges frayed, the memories soft around the corners. My home felt different tonight, not emptier, but clearer, like dust had been swept from corners I didn't even know were crowded. Later, as I washed the dinner dishes, I caught my reflection in the kitchen window, the faint lines on my face, the gray in my hair, the tired eyes. Yet behind them was something steady, something newly born. You know, sometimes the quietest changes are the ones that reshape your entire life. Sometimes you don't realize you're rebuilding yourself until one day you look up and you're standing in a place you've never seen before. And for the first time, it feels like home. The next few days passed in a rhythm that felt almost unfamiliar, gentle, steady, my own. Each morning I woke before the alarm, not because worry tugged me from sleep, but because my body seemed finally ready to greet the day without bracing for anything. I made coffee, read the newspaper, lingered over breakfast. Simple things, but they felt like reclaimed territory. By Thursday, I'd almost forgotten I used to spend these hours paying bills for people who had long stopped noticing what I did for them. Now the time was mine again. When I arrived at the pantry for my shift, Rosa was already arranging boxes near the entrance. You look lighter, she said without preamble. I blinked in surprise. Do I? She nodded once. Like someone who stopped carrying something too heavy. I let out a small breath. Maybe I did. Inside, people filtered in slowly. I helped an older gentleman find low-sodium items, guided a young father through the intake form, restocked a shelf of pasta. With every interaction, I felt myself rooting a little deeper into this new place, this new version of my days. No one needed me beyond the moment. No one assumed anything. No one took my help as an obligation. Around noon, I stepped outside for a break. Arthur was sitting on the bench under the awning, sipping from a thermos. You joining me? He asked, patting the empty seat. I sat beside him, letting the cold air nip at my cheeks. Busy day. He nodded. People always come near the end of the month. Bills pile up, food runs out. A thin silence stretched between us, comfortable as an old sweater. You ever say yes too long? I asked suddenly, surprising even myself. Arthur chuckled softly. I was married 39 years. I said yes to all sorts of things. His smile softened. But the trick is learning the difference between kindness and losing yourself. I lowered my gaze. I'm just now starting to understand that. He didn't press for details. Maybe he saw enough in my eyes. When my break ended, I felt steadier than when I'd first walked in. But later that afternoon, as I walked home through the slushy sidewalks, my phone buzzed again, this time with a string of messages from the family group chat. I hadn't opened it in days. I hesitated, then tapped the thread. Laura, We need to talk. Michael. Mom, call us ASAP. David. This is getting dramatic. Can we all just meet on Saturday? Dramatic. That word stung more than I expected. I wasn't dramatic. I was deliberate. I was awake. I was finally paying attention to the way my own life had been stretched thin across their needs like old fabric ready to tear. Still, I didn't answer. When I reached my apartment, I turned on the lamp in the living room and hung my coat by the door. The space felt warm, lived in, mine. I warmed leftovers for dinner, simple roasted vegetables and a bit of chicken, and sat at the table where sunlight from earlier still glowed faintly on the wood. As I ate, the voicemail notification blinked. I pressed play. It was Michael again, his voice taut. Mom, the insurance issue is bigger than I thought. I don't understand why you decided all of this without talking to us. You've always helped. You can't just change everything without warning. I stopped chewing. Can't. The word rolled through me like a cold draft. After the voicemail ended, I set my fork down and folded my hands in my lap. My heartbeat was steady, not fast, not panicked, just steady enough to reveal a truth I hadn't fully acknowledged until now. All these years, they hadn't just expected my help. They believed it was their right, a permanent extension of me they were entitled to use, unquestioned. I leaned back in my chair and let the thought settle. It didn't break me. It clarified me. Later, while washing dishes, I glanced at my reflection in the window again. The faint halo of the kitchen light framed my face, softening the lines, making me look almost like a woman I once knew. Before the years of repairs and payments and favors I'd woven into the backgrounds of their lives. A woman who used to dream beyond her responsibilities. A woman Henry would have recognized. When the phone buzzed once more, another message from Laura, I didn't rush to answer. I dried my hands slowly, folded the towel neatly, and turned off the light. In the living room, the blue binder sat on the table exactly where I'd left it. The confirmations tab peeked out, clean and crisp. I opened it and slid today's mail, the utility release letter, into one of the plastic sleeves. Every page in that section felt like a step forward. Every letter, every signature, every printed confirmation was a small reclaiming of myself. In the hush of the evening, I sat on my couch and let the quiet settle around me like a blanket. For decades, my life had been shaped by demands that never considered whether I had space, time, or strength left to give. But now, the days felt fuller in a new way. Full of purpose I chose, not purpose imposed on me. Funny how freedom doesn't arrive with fireworks. Sometimes it arrives with paperwork, with a stranger's kindness, with boundaries drawn in ink. Sometimes it arrives simply because you finally decide you deserve it. And I was deciding, more and more each day, that I did. The morning of the meeting, I woke before dawn, the sky still a quiet indigo. I moved through my apartment with a calm I hadn't known in years. I made coffee, tied my scarf, and placed the blue binder in my tote. Not as armor, just as truth. Laura's house was warm when I stepped inside, but the air was tight, as if the walls were holding their breath. My 3 children sat around the dining table, their faces drawn in ways I hadn't seen since they were young. Mom, Laura began softly, we just want to understand what's happening. I set my tote down and folded my hands. Nothing is happening, I said gently. I'm simply taking back the parts of my life I gave away without noticing. Michael leaned forward. But you always helped us. I did, I agreed, and I'm glad I could. But somewhere along the way, help stopped being gratitude and started being expectation. David frowned. We didn't mean to use you. I opened the binder and slid a few pages forward, copies of payments, contracts, bills with my name printed clearly. I know you didn't mean to, I said. Intent and impact aren't the same. A long silence followed. Winter light spilled across the table, catching the edges of the documents. I saw something shift across their faces. Not guilt, not defensiveness. Recognition. The quiet sting of realizing a person you love has been hurting without saying a word. I should have spoken sooner, I admitted, but I didn't want to burden anyone. And I suppose I thought, if I stopped being useful, maybe I'd stop being loved. Laura's eyes filled. Mom, you don't have to earn our love. I gave her a small, tired smile. Then it's time you love me as I am, not as someone who fixes everything. No shouting followed, no blame, just a soft, unraveling silence, the kind that makes room for a new beginning. They offered apologies, genuine, stumbling, imperfect, and for the first time, I believed they understood the shape of what I'd carried. When I left, the air outside felt bright and cold, brushing fresh against my cheeks. I walked slowly, letting each breath loosen something inside me. I felt lighter, not because everything was fixed, but because I had finally stepped out of the shadows I'd stood in far too long. That evening, back in my apartment, I warmed a bowl of soup and watched the sunset paint gentle colors across my window. My phone buzzed. Messages from new volunteer friends, asking if I'd join them for lunch next week. I smiled. Life, it seemed, had room for new people too. I sat quietly, feeling the peace settle deeper. Sometimes the greatest act of love is simply choosing yourself and trusting the world to keep spinning as you do. Thank you for listening to my story. If it touched you, feel free to like and subscribe. And tell me, if you were in my place, what would you have done?